who
facilitate.
know. No, but I don't know who knows what. So when you
Well,
say
it's best
everyday
to assume people.
language,
It's best to assume people don't know, because there's going to be people here for sure who won't know.
okay. So look, Hume's guillotine is this, right? You can't get an ought from an is. Here's an example. If I say, um, God is the creator of the universe,
Mm.
therefore we ought to obey him. That
Mm.
doesn't follow,
I think it does.
right?
I think it
But how
does.
does that follow? Do you know what an okay?
Well,
So look,
So
I've already
I
explained
understand
how
the
it
odd and
follows.
so but
is.
what
He owns
inference
us.
Yeah.
rule?
It follows by rights of ownership, and also Islamically, what the purpose for
But
which
the
God
rights
has
of ownership
created
isn't an inference
us.
rule.
Sorry, there are multiple reasons here, and the purpose for which we are created, because we're created by God, who owns us. He owns everything in the universe. He has an absolute dominion over everything. He creates us for His purposes, which in our case is to worship Him. So He has that right, and also we have a
Yeah, but
teleology
right
which
But
is in
that's
Him.
just begging
some
the
kind of
question against what
categorical.
Dog was saying.
No, it's
No,
not
no, no.
So
begging
But
any
I would
question.
say I
It's a statement of
understand the
fact.
odd is dichotomy, but we're
yeah,
talking about someone that's, let's say, the author of life, and then when we
here.
have life, we necessitate that there's
No, no, no.
non-life,
But
there's
look,
But
death.
look, a
just
Hold on, I'm not
physical
done. I'm
how
not
about
done.
the
object
no,
to
no, no.
be
Wait,
the
Darth
author of
Arianus.
life.
Wait,
Does
wait,
that
hold on.
No, no,
entail
but
that
you're
we ought to
assuming.
do with
Hold
that
on, you're assuming
physical
that the
object?
object. Can I talk? You're assuming that the object is independent of the command. When
That's
what we're
not
saying
true.
is
Not
that
at all.
God when He is the designer of life and death, and He then builds into that design a certain moral code, then it becomes intrinsic to the thing that He's creating.
But what do you mean by he built in a certain moral code,
Well,
right?
because let's say He built a universe in which murder is possible, right? And He's also, in the same way that He'd authored that, He also authored certain commandments that are related to that. But I think you're divorcing those two things that don't need to be divorced in this
Okay, how
particular
about
case. I
okay?
don't
So
think
can
you
you?
can derive an is from an ought from like a grassroots position. But if you're
What does
starting
that mean?
with God,
Yeah,
What
but
do
Absolutely.
you
how do
mean
you
by
derive an
Yes,
ought
yes,
from an
grassroots
you
is,
can.
right?
Yeah,
It's
so
position?
just
if you're
gonna be.
starting
agree.
with
It's just
just
gonna be.
the,
Wait,
like,
wait.
let's
But let
say
me
for
finish.
example, if we say that men, okay, the physiology of men is different than the physiology of women, that fact in and of itself does not necessitate that men should be, let's say, hunters and women should be gatherers. I agree with that. But when we start from the position of God existing and God being the author of these differences that exist, these valleys and peaks that exist in the universe, then I don't see necessarily that that should be separate or distinct from a moral code that He's also communicating. Now, He communicates to us verbally because that's the way humans understand ideas, is verbally. Um, but I don't necessarily see a divorce between that and the thing that He's authoring.
But if you're saying if he's communicating a moral code, then that's no longer divine command theory, right? Because the point is the command is just informing us of what we ought to do. It's not. It's not that we ought to do it simply in virtue of the fact that God commanded it.
Yeah, so I mean, this is an area of difference between Muslims. Like some Muslims, the Ash'ari position, for example, is that something is like that the moral commandment precedes the like the its manifestation in the creation, while others see it the other way around. So I mean, it's an interesting question, but my point here is that the same author of a certain possibility can also author a morality that pertains to that possibility, and those two things don't have to be separate. They're it's we're kind of seeing it that way only because one exists in words while the other exists in the molecules, but God is the origin of both.
No, yeah, I know, but I think the point that was being made, right, is that if you're going to say that uh
That
we
morality
ought
is cultural or what have you. Go.
no, 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 if you're going to say that we ought to do what God commands, right? The point is that that's going to be a categorical imperative, and you can't reduce or explain that categorical imperative in terms of non-imperatives, right? Because then there's just going to be the question of, if you say like the reason why we ought to listen to God is because he's all all knowing or all powerful, created the universe or whatever, that's just going to be to commit an is ought fallacy,
Well, this is my argument though about atheism, in that I don't think you can derive from the action of murder or the action of incest, for example, that it is inherently evil, just by studying the molecules, studying the, I don't think you can do that. But what I think you can do is you can say that the author of a message and the author of the universe are the same, and that in that sense that's intrinsic and they don't need to be separated.
I
Okay,
think
but
Yeah, but there's
part
gonna
of
be a
the issue, if I may
question.
say,
but
that,
the naturalists.
if I may say something here, part of the problem here is that we're debating here with an atheist who denies it would seem, who denies the existence of God, and will come up with all sorts of reasons why there's a problem. But we need to address why is atheism being believed here, because atheism, in my view, is a problem, and it's not founded on truth or reality, and that needs to be
Okay, what
justified rather than.
justifies those
Oh,
points?
okay,
But
okay. So
because at the
since
moment we have two worldviews which are just talking past each other about morality. But the issue here is one person denies that God exists, despite it being obvious that he does exist, and the other one obviously is speaking from a position of faith. And so we're not going to move forward unless we tackle the issue of atheism. So
but I
the
don't
atheists,
really see how that's
why?
relevant, because the point is I could grant to
No,
him,
no, it is
for
relevant because you're
example.
coming from a position of atheism. Therefore, you cannot connect with the reasons that believers are giving because you deny the premise
Not
of those
necessarily. So, for
beliefs.
example, no. So, look.
So,
For example,
so
is
can I
okay.
ask you,
Let's gonna
why are
apply.
you an atheist? My question here is to you.
Okay, great. I'll give you an
Well,
argument.
why are you an atheist? That's my question that I'd like to have an answer for. Why
Yeah,
are you an atheist?
I think it's I think, given Occam's razor, we could rule
Oh
God
my
out
god,
from our ontology, right?
why,
So you have to
Doc?
explain
Why
what
do you
Occam's
do
razor
this?
is, because my position is obvious. God exists because the
I don't
evidence is
think
all around us. So
Okay, so
why would
infallible agency is a contradiction. That's why God does not exist.
right again? You're starting from a position of atheism here. You're not explaining why God doesn't exist.
Oh, do you
You
want
haven't
me
given a
to give you
reason.
the
he's.
argument
I
as
mean,
to why
No, no,
infallible agents can't exist?
no. My point is that the assumption here is that God
wait. So you
exists.
don't want us to give us to give you the
But
argument? I thought you were asking for the
why do you
argument.
deny that? Why do you deny what is obvious to virtually all of humanity, that this universe,
I
its
don't see how it's
design, and
so.
so on, well, it is to virtually all of humanity now and throughout
Well,
Well, but
history,
who
maybe
isn't it?
it's
cares, right?
obvious to
They
them, but
could
it's not
be
So,
obvious to
radically
us.
deceived about their intuitions, right?
but
That's
they're
a
not.
possibility,
But they're
right?
not. That's the
Well, that's
thing.
just
I
their
mean,
Well,
what
conclusion.
one
I
can
mean, but who
deny all
cares that the
sorts of.
majority of people believe in God? We're just asking you why you think it's obvious.
Because it's
I
part of
have my
our
reason.
it's because our nature to believe. We know from research done at Oxford and Harvard that belief in a transcendent being is ubiquitous in our species. It's something that we naturally, it's part of our DNA. We believe in God, and that belief
Well,
accords
I
beautifully
guess that
with the
was
reality
disproven
of
by
the
my.
world we see around us. So when someone ceases to believe that, something has happened, whether it be some experience or some disappointment or something, to really push someone away from that belief. So I'm wondering what has happened for you not to believe in God
Well,
anymore.
I
I
just
was
told
never a
you I
theist.
don't think that infallible agents can exist.
You don't think they
Yeah,
can, or you know
but
that they cannot?
No,
you
it's
just made an
impossible. It's
assertion.
logically
You made an
impossible for an
assertion.
infallible agent to
Maybe
exist.
But
could
you
you?
made an assertion without any reasons. You've just made an
No,
assertion. You've
I'll
not.
give you the argument, right? So if you have a being that's infallible, it's going to be logically necessary that they never fail on any of the commitments that they have. Now, in terms of the agency portion, it's going to depend upon the conceptual analysis that you have on agency. But how agency is typically conceived is that there's this being in question that has normative states, it has beliefs and desires,
I think this is
and it
gonna go
could
over their
be
head.
in or out of accord. I'm sorry?
I'm saying I think this is gonna go over their heads. Let's
It's
just say
they
that.
can be
Can I comment
in.
in here?
I don't care what you think, dog, but I'm just gonna run it anyway. They
Okay,
can
that's
be
fine.
in or
You
out of
can't call him
accord.
dog. That's not nice.
That's
They
actually
can
my name.
they can be in or out of accord with those norms, right? So agency isn't going to be the type of thing which is going to be law like, right? So
Mm.
the question
I
is,
think you've
the
lost us.
question
I think you've
is,
just lost us in what you
Yeah,
said.
Darth, can I
what do you
respond to
mean?
him?
You've lost
Okay,
us.
let me
You're
finish.
not being clear
I
at all, I'm
haven't
afraid.
finished the argument, right?
Yeah, but I'm just letting you know
So
you've
if
lost
it's
us. so
Well,
far.
I
You're not.
told you it would go over
Das,
their
you've already
heads.
presupposed the definition of how we're defining God when we say he's, what did you
Yeah, but
call, what did you call him?
everybody has
Well,
a
that's
different
how
Infallible
What was
agent.
the
definition.
it's
definition? No,
typically
no, that's not how
conceived
we
of,
infallible.
that he
Infallible
has
is exactly what
agency,
God does
right?
and has done.
Wait, but then what do you mean
The
by
laws of
God if you say
legation.
that he's not an
You
agent that's also infallible? What do you mean?
say that
You
again,
see,
sir? I didn't hear
but
that.
part of the problem with this is that you've not connected with anything that believers actually believe. To take a Muslim, for example, the nature and the concept and understanding of God presented in that tradition, you've not engaged with that at all. You've come up with this artificial construction of your own head, and
Okay, tell me
you
what your
think
conception of God
you've
is.
refuted that, and quite frankly, a lot of what you said is very opaque and doesn't really make much sense
Okay,
to
tell
me.
me why
I don't
so
think it's
So
you're
necessary to
making
know to believe in
claims,
God.
but
it's not
you're
really
not
done.
telling
It's not really
me
done it.
you're not
So,
telling me in virtue of what my argument doesn't go through your conception of God,
well, as I said,
right?
it's not. It is opaque. Your argument is not clear. It's not, and also not connect. The bits I did understand don't appear to be connecting at all
Do
with
you think agents are
the
the type
normative
of
belief.
entities that can
So
be in or out of accord with their beliefs and desires? Yes or no? That they
We're
could
using terms of belief and desires
self-correct?
and we can't comprehend what they mean using
you
God.
see,
There's no point.
again, the point is that the universe
A
has
desire is a want,
numerous.
a
So let's come
commitment
back
for
to what
something to be
many believers
actualized.
actually do believe. The universe exhibits incredible signs of design and purpose and order and beauty. The ayats, the signs of something beyond itself, an intelligence, a mind that we call God. Now, nothing you have said is
Yeah,
connected with
yeah, and how
this
does
at all.
theism give an
Um,
explanation for that without appealing to a mere just so story,
no, it's not a
right?
just so story. It is
Oh,
evident.
yes, it is, right?
No,
Because under the
you're
theist
not presenting an argument now.
explanation,
You're just saying
no,
I
Paul,
don't. You're just
Paul,
saying no.
can I respond, Paul? Look, the theist is going to want to give an intentional explanation rather than a gnomic explanation as to why the physical constants are
You've
so
just lost
finely
it.
tuned
You said gnomic
and
explanation.
ordered.
See, you're not
Wait,
using
wait,
ordinary
but
language here.
I'll get to the so under the theist explanation, right? The reason why it's a just so story is because it's already presumed in the theist hypothesis that God just prefers to create intelligible universes, right? And
No,
given that we
no,
have an intelligible universe, God's preference for that type of universe explains why we have our universe, right? But
no. It's
the
not right. No,
idea, Paul, the idea is that I could just make the same just so story under naturalism, right? I could just say some physical object had a certain type of disposition to create universes that are intelligible, and that's why we have universes that are intelligible. Now, did I say anything novel or interesting there,
no, you
right?
didn't.
Or
No, you
did I
didn't.
just
And
provide an untestable narrative
the
like
problem
under
is that
theism?
our humanity as a species, we naturally, children as adults, the vast majority of people now that
Wait,
history.
but Paul, are you going to
Hang
deal
on a
with my
second. Hang on a
argument,
second.
or are you
Hang on a
just going to
second.
evade and
Hang on a
dodge?
second. Hang on a second. It is a natural apprehension of reality that we understand because we observe in the universe many ubiquitous, incredible, infinite signs of whether it be a pool of light, or whether it be a tree, or whether it be the laws of physics, or even the universe itself. All these contingent realities speak to a necessary being beyond the universe that has brought this into being.
Yeah,
And
but the point of my argument is
this
just
is
to
a
say that under
foundational
your
point,
view, if you
which is
posit a necessary being,
yeah,
number
no, there
one,
has to
you
be a
can only
necessary. There
give a
has to
just
be a
so
necessary being.
story,
It's
and
not a
number
just. No, but
two, you're going
you
to
see,
posit more entities than the
no,
naturalists,
no, no,
right? The
no, no. I'm not.
naturalists fare better in terms of ontological economy than the theists.
You see, it's the atheist who has a just so story in denying the obvious. It is obvious to everyone,
Wait, but are
apart from
you
a
going
few,
to, Paul?
that
I
the
made two
universe
claims.
is designed. Saying no, hang on, your argument is not an argument. It is simply
No, it is an
uh,
argument, right?
no, it's
Because
Charles,
not.
there's
Let
you're
me
not
explain
going to
why
get
it's not an argument.
anywhere by
Let
just
me say
it's a
interrupting.
why it's not an
It's not
conclusion,
a
argument.
right? Its
conversation.
You're
premises and
simply saying
conclusions,
Charles,
it's
isn't
a
it? It
just so
is an
story.
argument. But look,
That's not an argument.
you
That's
Charles,
said
if
simply
you're
you
just going
said
to
simply
I
a
interrupt,
made
we're
two
not.
Yahoo comment.
claims. No, look, I made two claims, right? I said that the theist worldview is just going to be at a stalemate with the naturalists in terms that both are good, just going to provide just so stories, right,
No,
for how the universe is so finely tuned, right? So both worldviews are just going to posit like brute facts, right? In the case of God, it's just going to be a brute fact that he exists. And if you posit libertarian free will, then it's going to be a brute fact why he chose to create the universe, right? And then under naturalism, it's just going to be a brute fact that, well, you could take the Oppian view and you think that the initial conditions of natural reality, that those things are just going to be brutally contingent. Okay, fine,
No,
right? They're
it's not.
both
No,
at a
no.
stalemate.
Sorry, hang on. Let me
That's
respond to
claim
that.
number. Can I go through the claims and then
Well,
you
no,
can respond?
you made it. You
So
made a number of
that's
points there.
claim
Hang
number
on. You made a
one.
number of points there that need to
Claim
be
number
responded to.
two.
No,
No, I'm
but
sorry.
you
Claim
can't
number
just go on and
two.
on. I'm afraid you need to. There needs to
Theism.
be a response here because
Theism does far worse in terms of ontological economy than the naturalists because they
no,
pose more entities. Like God is omniscient, God is omnibenevolent, God is omnipotent,
no,
God is personal. And the naturalist just rejects all of that ontology, right? So you're
no,
positing more entities and your view is less parsimonious.
no. Well, what we're saying is that the existence of God is axiomatic. It's self-evident that
Well,
because of the abundant evidences in the universe,
If it's axiomatic,
what
it can't be justified.
excuse me, no, excuse me, the evidences are clear, numerous, almost innumerable, whether it
do you
be in
understand
So
what
you
a
physics and
haven't
biology,
provided
substitution?
those
or
clear
hang
examples.
on a second, you're interrupting,
Wait, but why would we let you
and
finish if
within
you're begging the
ourselves, the
question?
I'm
evidences
just
within
going to start
ourselves.
muting people who are interrupting. Okay,
Well,
thank
you're
you.
not going to mute. Well, sorry, you're going to be muting. Sorry, you can't mute people, by the way. You don't have that ability to mute anyone. Um,
Go ahead, Paul.
so, um, the belief in God is axiomatic. It's self-evident, abundantly attested, as I say, in the universe and within ourselves. Atheists who are in denial of what is axiomatic, self-evident to everyone through multiple, innumerable evidences, have issues, and it's not equivalent to naturalism.
Well, now
Naturalism
you're just
can't
suppositizing.
offer, it can't in any way offer any evidence against that. So I start from the
Okay,
position
explain
of
the
God's existence.
explanatory advantages under
So,
theism in comparison to naturalism.
so atheism is a problem because it cannot. It's in denial of the obvious, and so it's got to come up with good reasons why God cannot exist. And I've never heard any reasons offered by an atheist why God cannot exist. You cannot offer evidences or compelling arguments why what is obvious and axiomatic to everyone is simply false.
Look,
It's
you
not
say
possible.
atheism this, atheism that, but have you responded to any of the arguments that we provided to you? The
But you
number
haven't
one,
provided
theism just
arguments. So
produces
they are
just
not
so
real.
stories, and
They are
number
not
two,
real
that
arguments. They're not real
Yeah,
arguments.
but
They're
that
see,
bogus
theism is
arguments.
see,
going to be
here's the
less
thing.
parsimonious
They're
than
not real
naturalism,
arguments.
so
Here's
it
the
does
thing, Paul
worse in
They
terms of
are
Williams.
ontological economy.
artificial. They're artificial
You're
phantoms. They're
telling
not real
us,
arguments.
you're telling us.
They're
Hold on.
empty
You're
arguments.
telling. What?
Okay,
Hold
then
on, hold on.
respond to one of our arguments,
You're
right?
telling
No,
us
they're
Logical
no.
empty.
problem of
No, no,
evil,
no.
They're
But
not logical
infallible
problems.
agency, respond.
They are empty. They are illusory arguments without substance.
Paul.
And just repeating my name is not going to make the argument
You're
either.
so the issue is you're all you're doing by saying these arguments are empty is just your
Mm.
it's just another form of begging the question, right?
No,
It's
it's not.
if I, for example, no, listen to
Not
me
at
and then
all.
you can respond after I'm finished, right? If somebody said, like, let's say they made an argument, right? Like Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? Or they made an inductive argument, right? Like we've seen something happen over and over again. Therefore, we have reason to believe this is like a law of nature or something like that. And you were to say, oh yeah, that argument, it's rubbish, right? Okay, but that's not a response to the argument. You have to tell us why it's rubbish. And saying that something is self evident, right, is simply a form of begging the question because it's clearly not self evident to us, right?
No,
So if it's not self
no,
evident to us, then
it
it's
is.
not self evident.
No, because the problem is within yourselves. There are many things we take for granted as self-evident. Let me give you one example, and you can't refute this. That the existence. That, can you prove the existence of the universe? Can you prove the universe even exists? Can you prove that anything exists? Can you prove that now, to me,
Um,
logically?
well, presumably, well, I don't know if I could prove it to you.
Why do you
Well, no,
have
it's
to
not.
throw
I'm
in
asking
the?
you. No,
We
I'm
would
But
have
asking
to
you
why
to
You
did?
prove
prove
fall
it.
it.
for
Why
this
did you
I'm
have?
bait.
asking you
Why
to
did
prove
you?
it.
Real
No,
quick.
no.
Why did you have to? Why did you have to throw in the word logically?
I'm
Look,
asking you to
so Paul,
prove
I
the
made
universe
two
exists.
claims, right? I said that theism is just going to produce just so stories, right?
That's a
When
mere
you try to
claim.
offer an
It's a mere claim.
intentional explanation, it just says that God prefers to create
Yeah.
universes that are intelligible, and
Okay.
that just explains why
Sorry.
we have an intelligible universe,
I asked
right?
someone
Yeah.
a
So
question here, by the way.
respond to that. And then
Dude.
number
I
two,
asked a
that
question. No,
theism
no, no.
just does far
Hang on.
worse in terms of ontological
People are not
economy than
addressing the subject here.
naturalism. So
I'm saying that
respond
there.
to those two claims and stop
No,
dodging.
no. I'm saying that there are many things we take as axiomatic. Even atheists take many things as axiomatic. But they have a problem with
Hmm.
one
I don't
axiomatic
know how that's
self-evident thing, which
responding
is
to my
God.
argument.
So I
Yeah.
brought up just one question, which you have to accept as self-evident without any proof, in my view, unless you can give it to me now, that the universe exists. What is your proof that the universe exists?
I exist, therefore I'm part of the universe. Therefore, the universe exists.
Right, and your proof is what? Yes, a certain
He just
assertion. Where's
gave
the
Well, I
you
could
an
take it.
argument.
Well, I could take my empirical evidence as proof.
That's not it.
Yes.
You see, you can't prove that something outside of your mind is actually real,
Wait,
objective,
well, wait a
independent
minute.
of
How
your mind.
does theism get out of
Oh well,
No.
solipsism?
You're
I'm
Because
missing
gonna.
the point
theism
here. You're
solves
missing the
skeptical
point.
scenarios,
You're
right? So
missing
if
the
you want to
point
go
here.
down that rabbit tail, I
I'm
can just
saying
ask you,
that there
how
are
does
many
your view
self-evident
refute hard
that
solipsism?
there are many
Answer me that,
self-evident
Paul.
facts that atheists accept
Why
without
is
proof.
solipsism false, Paul? Just give me the argument.
Yeah, sure, but doesn't mean we're gonna
Um,
accept everything as axiomatic, right?
Atheists ultimately cannot prove a whole range of things which they accept as axiomatic, but they privilege all of those and say, no, we won't talk about those, and you won't
Okay,
want to
what
talk
are
about them,
those sets
but
of things, and
we will
tell us
talk about
why
God.
we can't
And I'm saying that your radical
justify those things?
skepticism, your radical
Just give,
skepticism
just
is
give us a
Radical
set
selective
of things,
and
Paul.
skepticism, man.
non-justified. You've
Wait
either
a
got to be
minute. Wait a minute.
skeptical of
But look.
everything and not
Hold on,
just one
Paul.
Can
thing.
we? But
Paul.
does that mean that we can be skeptical of the things that you say, such as you
Yeah,
brought
exactly.
you no? So you brought saying that you brought
Can you
studies
invite
about
Saint
how,
onto
and
the
if
stage?
I may, Darth, please. So you brought earlier. You said that belief is innate, essentially, because there was studies done, and I imagine these would be psychological studies, and then you refer to it as DNA. So should we just accept yours unquestionably because you mentioned DNA, but you do not accept evolutionary DNA evidence, but you'll accept
Okay,
psychological,
okay,
uh,
just stop, right? Just
psychological.
stop
I'm saying that
rambling. Look,
atheist radical
this guy made
skepticism
a
is
claim
selective. It
that
does
both
not
Darth,
that
why
he
can't
had
you
to
it
let
does
other
not
respond
people
apply
to
talk,
both
dude?
of
skepticism
the
to other.
arguments I gave, and he provided
Darth,
zero
why can't you
counter
let other
rebuttal.
people talk and hold conversations outside of yours?
Because you
Please,
have
Paul.
nothing interesting to say. You're just
The
blabbering.
point, look, the point here
Oh,
is,
Okay, could we
okay.
look, the
moderate?
point,
Look,
no, listen, the point here is that he is willing to use psychological studies and then refer to it as DNA innate belief. But then when you ask him, what about the DNA proof, the evidence that links evolution? Would you use that
No,
axiomatic or does it
no.
contradict your
Sorry.
faith?
okay, Paul.
I don't
So
think
I need
Paul,
so.
to let me answer
theism
that then. If
provides
I could
just
answer
so
that, please.
stories, just like naturalism
Someone has
does,
asked me a
and
question, and I'm now going
theism
to answer it.
fares
Okay.
far worse.
So
Theism does
I'm
far
now
worse in
no.
terms of
Excuse me. I'm
ontological
talking.
economy than
I'm talking. I
naturalism.
was
Can you
responding
respond to
to
those two
that
claims
point.
and stop bloviating?
I'm now going to respond to the point that guy made. I will need to actually correct something I said. When I said DNA earlier on, I was speaking figuratively. I didn't mean literally the actual DNA in a gene in a cell. I meant it's imprinted on our natures as a species.
So
So
then that means,
I
so
might have
then when I
misspoken.
reversed it
I
on
think
you, but when I
I
reversed it
wasn't
on you,
making a comment about
I
evolution.
understand, Paul. I understand, Paul, but it goes to what you were trying to give, saying that atheists have a list of things that are axiomatic for us. But yet, when I flipped it on you, then it becomes, well, part of it is figurative. I might have misspoken. So you're giving a list of axiomatic beliefs allegedly that atheists have, even though Atheists don't have a divine decree, right, of something that we have to believe in. We can have individual belief systems inside of the separation that is atheism or agnosticism.
Okay. No. Well,
But
what?
when you speak as a theist, you
Mhm.
have to hold yourself to a certain axiomatic belief system. And when I use your words against you, you have to reflect on, does what you say
No, you
actually
didn't use
reflect
my
your
words against
axiomatic?
me. No,
Yes, I
I think
did.
But
you're.
why?
I
This is
think
just not going to go
if you let
anywhere.
me answer that, then please. You're not using my words against me. You queried what I meant by DNA, and I should have qualified that. Okay, fair enough. I was speaking figuratively, poetically. I thought it was obvious, but obviously it wasn't obvious. My contention is that the radical skepticism employed by atheists is highly selective.
Yeah, but
There are
I want to
vast
say, I
areas.
just want to point
Excuse me.
out.
Excuse me. Excuse me. There are vast areas of knowledge and perceptions of reality which an atheist cannot prove, but they
Hey, can I
accept that
answer
they
your
exist.
question?
No, because I'm speaking. It's supposed to be a conversation. So the
Well,
existence,
God doesn't have much to contribute anyway.
of a universe, a mind-independent universe, is something that atheists just accept. They can't prove that something outside of their own minds is real. It's
But you
impossible to
can't
prove.
prove that under theism
Excuse
as
me.
well. So that's
Excuse me.
why
No,
I
no,
asked you, how do
no.
you
I'm.
disprove external?
I'm.
How do you disprove
You're
that
interrupting me, by the way.
skepticism about the
You're
external world
interrupting,
is
and you're
false? You
interrupting, and I'm
just gave
speaking.
me mumbo
You're
jumbo.
interrupting. Yeah. Well, I don't really care if you think it's Mama John, because I'm talking and you're interrupting. What else do atheists accept? The existence of other minds, the other human
Okay, how do you
minds.
prove
We
other
can't.
minds exist under
Hang on a
theism?
second. No, you can't keep on jumping on me every 3 words and
Because you make
interrogating
a
what I'm saying.
variety of claims that
All
you
right.
can't justify. That's
No,
why I had to
you
press
can't.
you
No,
on that.
this is called. You can't do that. Okay, you got to just zip it for a second. So the existence of the universe, independent of us, is something atheists cannot prove and simply accept on trust, on faith. Secondly, the existence of other human minds, like the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, we can't prove that. We accept that they actually exist. Okay, we trust that this person actually has a consciousness and feelings and emotions pretty much like our own. We can't prove it. We just accept it on faith. There's a long list of things I can mention. I'm not going to bore you because your tolerance for me is, what I'm saying is quite short. But my point is this: the atheists assume a lot about reality, but their radical skepticism only applies selectively when it comes to religious beliefs. Why? It's because there is some personal history to do with anger towards God,
You
disappointment,
can't prove that.
relationships, whatever.
That's the
Why,
point that I'm getting at, dude. That you are saying things.
just stop.
Darth, you do not run this room, my guy.
Look,
Okay,
but
how much
is he
have you
gonna?
spoken
The
compared to
question
other
of the
people?
room is
Darth,
that is he gonna respond
Darth,
to the argument that I
Darth.
gave?
How
Right.
much do you get to speak over other people so we can clarify that right now, and then we can all wait our turn.
Okay, just say what you're gonna say.
Thank you.
I moved him to the audience because he won't shut up, basically.
So with what you just said, though, right? I'm sorry, my train of thought is. Could you repeat yourself real quick so I don't misspeak against you?
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I'm,
I
I'm,
got it.
I'm,
I'll steel man the position, right? He's saying that atheists selectively choose what to count as an
be
axiomatic
skeptical about.
belief
Exactly.
and to be skeptical about, right? And they're skeptical about God because they have some
Yeah.
Yeah,
animosity
the
towards him.
personal. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Some
Now,
personal issue. Yeah.
what
Exactly.
about, like, when people talk to me about my atheism, right? I say, like, I'm agnostic to deism, because that's a totally different concept. The concept that there was a creator that has not divinely spoken to humans or given divine right. Now, when we speak of atheism, at least to me, it's about what the scripture says and is attributed to an alleged God, whether it be Yahweh, Jesus, Vishnu, Allah, etc. And that is how it is determined about atheism to me personally. So it wouldn't have anything to do with personal feelings. It's about what is ascribed to the to the God, the theist God that is allegedly spoke to humans. So I
Okay.
think that's a misconception about what you said, right? You're trying to label everybody into one big group that are atheists, saying, "Oh, well, it's personal reasons. They've had some type of fallout with the God that obviously exists." And but what I've shown there is that's not the case, at least with me. So I'm outside the prem. Can we put this guy at the bottom,
Yeah,
type you or
So
something?
it sounds like your criticism is with the communication, like the scripture, and attributing that to a
The
creator,
claims, the
right?
claims.
Which is a little bit different than what the other people, I think,
Well,
were.
yeah.
that's
Well, I
fine,
wanted
but
to
to
point
try to
out.
ascribe, I'll let
Yeah.
Abdul speak in just a second. But I just wanted to show that Paul's claim is not definitive, right? He's trying to make definitive claims about people and their belief systems or lack thereof. But what I've shown is that's not the case universally, even though he's trying to bring that position. Go ahead, Abdul.
Yeah, so I think all this psychologizing is sort of not very interesting. I mean, this should be like an empirical, question. Look, the point that was so yeah, it's gonna be true that there are gonna be certain beliefs that we take to be hinges, right? Like knowledge or justification can't happen in like a vacuum, right? And unless you're like an infallibilist, you're not gonna think that, for example, um, simply having an experience of something alone is going to provide justification of the inferential kind, right? And so, I mean, if you've ever, I mean, I'm sure you've never read of something called the myth of the given, right? Basically, the idea is that no justification can happen in a vacuum. You're always going to have beliefs in the background in order to
Mm.
justify what you believe. So that, yeah, that's true. But the point is, saying that, well, we have to have beliefs in the background, we have to have some kind of epistemic hinges, like things that we believe from which we derive everything else. Okay, great, but the question is going to be, what should those things be? And um presumably that's going to be, to some degree, a pragmatic question, right? A question of things like intuition, a question of things like, what things are necessary in order to um um in order to like have knowledge about, like, for example, causal knowledge, knowledge of how we got here, stuff like that. And what I'm saying is that it's not really clear that belief in theism should qualify as one of those hinge beliefs.
I think it is, because I don't think we need proof, philosophical proof is not required to believe in God, because it is a pre-cognitive reality that exists prior to our having any apprehension of reality at all. Is the existence of God, the existence of the world, the universe, its order, and our created nature. And I'm saying that the atheists' selective skepticism is unjustified because it's arbitrary.
But I'm
We
saying it's
have to
all no,
assume.
no, no. But look,
Well, no, let me finish. But we have to assume certain things as given. Even atheists have to assume many things without any evidence at all. I've already mentioned the existence of other minds. I mentioned the mind-independent existence of God, of the universe, I should say, and also that our cognitive faculties actually can speak accurately and truthfully about the universe around us, and we're not just victims of an illusion. We trust science to work, but this is a huge faith that it does actually objectively describe and accurately map reality. There's a lot of faith and a priori kind of stuff going on here. I'm saying that belief in God is a foundational a priori fact, and
yeah, but I'm
that
saying, why should we include that as a
because
foundational
and it's something
priori fact?
that Descartes said in a slightly different way, is that without God's existence we cannot apprehend anything. He is the
Why?
ground of our being. The fact that we have any faculties at all, that we can apprehend the universe accurately, we have a sense of morality, is all on the assumption that God exists and has brought us into
Why?
being, has given us this. Well, because it's axiomatic. You're asking why, but you would never ask. You would, if a solipsist was to ask you, prove you exist. How would you persuade the solipsist that you exist? How would you do
Does it
it?
matter though? Is my question.
No, but no, no,
But of
but
course
look,
it
what
matters,
I'm
because
saying,
it's a question of
No,
how we
no,
I'm
but
know
granting
things. How we
Paul,
look,
know
I'm
I'm
things.
just
granting
gonna,
you.
Of course it
Abdullah. I
matters.
just want to ask,
Hold on.
what does it matter though if we can't
No, no,
prove
no.
it?
It does matter to the conversation. Look, I'm granting Paul,
I don't
right?
understand why it would matter. If it
Well,
because if the
let's
conversation
look. You stop derailing the convo, right? Look, the idea is that look, I'm